Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. It's a packed show today as we get you a deep dive into the world's most prominent global events. Let's start with the headlines. Vladimir Putin says that he has no intention of using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, says the war is part of Russia's wider struggle against Western domination. Also praises Prime Minister Modi's independent foreign policy and says both nations share special ties. Rishi Sunak finishes his first week as British Prime Minister, plans to create a buffer in the public finances to fix the budget shortfall, which could lead to tax rises and spending cuts. Also says he's in agreement with Prime Minister Modi to conclude a comprehensive and balanced free trade agreement. Brazilians head to polls this Sunday. Incumbent far-right President Jair Bolsonaro is locked in a tight contest with former leftist President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The European Union strikes a deal with its 27 member countries to ban new cars with combustion engines by 2035. Cars currently account for 15% of all CO2 emissions in the EU. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is set to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on his two-day visit to China. The agenda is likely to include strategic cooperation, partnership, and exchange views on global developments. Sharif is among the first foreign leaders to visit China after Xi Jinping secured a third term. Myanmar's military warns that any pressure from its Southeast Asian neighbors to put a time frame on a peace plan would create negative implications. This comes in reaction to a meeting of foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations member countries in Jakarta to discuss easing the intensifying crisis. First up, the big political story from the United States, the midterm elections for the US Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate will take place on the 8th of November. Why is this important? Because the party, which has a majority in the Congress, will have a greater say in passing of legislations, and it also impacts the popularity of the sitting president. The worry for Joe Biden is that his approval ratings have been less than 50% since August. The outcome of these elections will impact Donald Trump's future as well. Let's now go across to Olivier Knox, national political correspondent at the Washington Post. Olivier, thank you very much for joining us. Give us a sense of the big issues that are playing out on the ground in this midterm election.
Well, as Americans head to the polls to pick the entire House of Representatives, about a third of the Senate, and 39 governors of states and territories, the big issues that have roiled the campaign have been, of course, record high inflation and notably very high gas prices. Gas prices correlate very closely to party performance in the United States, and so the Democrats are on the ropes here. The other issues that have been on the table, one has been crime. In 2020 and 2021, we saw rising crime in America, rising violent crime in America. Republicans are blaming that on the Biden administration and on Democrats more broadly. The border issue, immigration over the southern border, has been an issue, particularly inside the Republican Party. You'll remember that Donald Trump's big slogan was to build a wall on the southern border. And then in late spring, early summer, the Supreme Court kind of lobbed a grenade into the political landscape with a decision that rolled back Roe versus Wade. That's a basically 40-year-old decision that guaranteed women in America access to abortion. But they rolled that back. A number of states now have made it illegal, and Democrats think they can harness anger among women nationwide to maybe limit the damage of midterms.
Right. Also, how many Donald Trump-backed candidates in this election? And if they do well, what does that mean for Donald Trump?
Well, if he does well, particularly at the House level, it'll mean that he'll have enormous influence over the legislative process. Now, the assumption right now, the basic conventional wisdom is that the Republicans will retake the House. Control of the Senate is something of a coin flip. But if, in fact, the Republicans do retake the House, and if, in fact, the Donald Trump, the most loyal Donald Trump supporters are carried to office, then obviously he will wield enormous influence over that chamber. And what that means is, any legislation to do with government finances has to start in the House. And so that's one important point. But the other important point is that the House would then be able to do what Republicans have said they want to do for the last year and a half or so, which is investigate the Biden administration, investigate Hunter Biden, the president's son, look into the withdrawal from Afghanistan, a number of other issues as well. So it's not just legislation. It would also be the use of congressional investigative power to harass the Biden administration.
Right. Do you also feel that it would give a chance to Donald Trump to maybe run for president once again?
Well, Donald Trump has been teasing a run for president in 2024, essentially since leaving office. It's the subtext to most of his copious fundraising emails out to his supporters. Republicans had begged him not to announce before the midterms. They want to try to keep Donald Trump symbolically off the ballot, if you will. Republican leadership worrying that if Donald Trump announces before the midterms, then Democrats would be able to say, aha, Donald Trump is effectively on the ballot and get turnout. Notably among independents who helped Joe Biden capture the presidency last time around. So we're going to be watching very closely, not just in the run-up to these midterms, but afterwards. Look to see if a lot of Trump supporters win. He will no doubt come out and take credit for their victories. And then, of course, it would increase the likelihood that he would run in 2024.
All right, Olivier Knox, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for summing up this important midterm election on the 8th of November in the United States. Moving on from United States to United Kingdom now. Earlier this week, Rishi Sunak, an Indian origin MP from the Conservative Party, created history in Britain after he was appointed as the new Prime Minister. While this is a major boost to his political career, he's taking over at a time when Britain is grappling with spiraling prices and falling GDP. He has promised to fix these issues in his initial address at Downing Street and later in the Parliament. CNBC-TV18 Sanjay Suri wraps up how the first week played out for Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak has quite energized the whole country. He's coming across as confident, aggressive. We saw him dig into Labour at Prime Minister's questions, that most visible of markers. The Conservative Party had been floundering all over the place. He, unlike his two immediate predecessors, has no undoings to be embarrassed about, and he is gathering the party together.
I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you.
With the FTA, we do have a problem. The two prime ministers spoke, after which Modi tweeted to say that they agreed on taking the FTA forward. Sunak did not mention the FTA in his tweet. He said there was agreement on economic cooperation. Perhaps we can't read too much into that difference, but there is a conflict here, and that conflict has arisen as a result of Sunak taking over as the Prime Minister of Britain. He had pledged in his 10-point policy statement on migration in Clause 7 that any trade agreement with any country must be conditional on that country accepting return of its undocumented overstayers. The financial policy statement has been put off till the 17th of November, and this is the second time it's been postponed, itself an indicator how difficult this is going to be. This really is going to be the tough nut to crack. So far, Rishi Sunak has been in campaigning mode. We've had very little from him on what he specifically would do.
I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come.
And India would be looking for an early conclusion of the trade deal with the UK, but it's not going to be an easy negotiation, and negotiations are definitely not over. Let's get you the important news coming in from India. A high-level meeting of the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee took place in Mumbai. The delegates first gathered at the 2611 Memorial to pay homage to victims of the 2008 Mumbai attacks. The meeting is focusing on the use of new payment mechanisms in terror financing and use of AI and drones in carrying out terror attacks. I caught up with David Scharia, Chief of Branch, Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate of the UN Security Council. I began by asking him if the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee had failed in bringing the perpetrators of 2611 to book.
I wouldn't look at it as a failure or anything of this kind. I think what we've seen today was a very emotional ceremony, and it allowed all of us to reconnect with victims and to express our deep sympathy to what they're going through. I see this meeting in the same place where the attack occurred actually as a huge win, as a strong message that we are continuing with what we are doing. We are resolved to continue countering terrorism, and we are continuing with our way of life, including hosting meetings. So symbolically, I see the hosting of the meeting in this place as a huge win.
Right.
The message that came from all member states in the meeting was also very important. Several member states have emphasized the commitment of all member states to bring terrorists to justice. This is something that our office is deeply committed to. And wherever we go, whenever we go, in India or anywhere else, we repeat the same message: bring terrorists to justice, because this is what is the moral and the legal duty of every member state.
Right, and this meeting would lead to a framework when it comes to fighting terror financing and also use of technology, and striking a balance between the benefits of technology and technology for the use of terrorism. Shifting focus to Brazil now, where the widely talked about election for the final round of polling on the 30th of October. 156 million voters will decide the fate of two candidates with starkly different rhetoric. Why is this important for democratic values and climate change? Madiha Mujawar and Radhika Udas give a quick snapshot of why this election is significant.
Incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro and his left-wing challenger Lula da Silva are attempting to woo Brazil's poor to swing the polls in their favor. As inflation crosses 7%, the Central Bank of Brazil has raised interest rates to as high as 13.7%. The country's economic growth is expected to grow at a moderate 2.8%. Unemployment rate stands at 8.7%. While Lula has been promising to eradicate poverty, Bolsonaro government is providing temporary cash handouts to ease the pressure. Former army captain Bolsonaro won the 2018 presidential elections with his anti-corruption campaign that had brought down his rival Lula, who had ruled the country from 2003 to 2010 and enjoyed a 90% approval rating. Bolsonaro's campaign is a continuation of his conservative pro-business agenda. Bolsonaro has been criticized for the handling of the COVID pandemic by dismissing it as a little flu. He drew heavy criticism for allowing deforestation for the land exploitation in the Amazon rainforest, posing a climate threat to the world. On the other hand, Lula wants to put the state back at the heart of economic policy making and government spending, promising a new tax regime that will allow for higher public spending. Lula also promises to work to reduce carbon emissions and deforestation in the Amazon, which has increased by 75%. Lula won the first round of elections, securing 48.4% votes versus 43.2% for Bolsonaro. The country has seen widespread violence and clashes between supporters of the two candidates. With the race looking tight, Bolsonaro seems to have taken a cue from former US President Donald Trump. He has already made unsubstantiated allegations of electoral fraud. This has sparked fears among many that the results could plunge the country into chaos.
We're heading into a short break, but coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin rules out use of nuclear weapons in the Ukraine war. A special discussion with former Indian ambassador to Russia, Ajay Malhotra, when we're back.